5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
You're listening to Tabletop and Beyond with your host, Justin.
But before we get started, how was your Geek Week?
And co-hosts Dan and Jason.
You have to be willing to let the dice help you tell the story.
Okay, look, this year I'm going to stop mispronouncing words. Join us as we cover board games to war games and beyond.
And welcome back to Tabletop and Beyond. I'm your host, Justin. I'm here with Dan and Jason.
Hey.
Howdy.
And we've got a special guest today, Matt. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, guys. Happy to be here.
We're happy to have you. It's great to have you on here. You've been gaming with us for a little while. I know you through Jason mostly, I think, right?
Yes. Yeah, Jason invited me to some gaming, and man, I just had a great time. So it's been really cool, and happy to talk to you guys about all things geek.
Very good, very good. This is the show for it, for sure. Today, we are talking about RuneQuest, the RPG. We were fortunate enough to get a copy of the starter set from Chaosium themselves. They sent it for us to review. Spoiler alert, we had a great time with it. But the whole show is going to be about our review of it, and Matt was fortunate enough to grace us with his presence, I guess, to play it a couple weeks ago. So we wanted to get his insight with us today. So yeah, Matt, we're really excited to have you again.
Awesome, thanks.
But of course, before we get started, let's begin with our Geek Week. Jason, why don't you kick us off with your Geek Week?
Yeah, man. So this past week, I had a Friday night game night, which happens about once a month. And this time, I played a game that I hadn't played before. If you guys remember back when we did the resolution, like the New Year's resolution, one of the resolutions I made was to play a new game every month.
Oh, right.
Yep. So those local, monthly game nights make that easy to do. And the game we played this time was called Suburbia, which is actually a game I think from 2012 is when I think it came out. But it's kind of like, and people describe it this way, and I would agree. It's like SimCity in a board game.
Weird. Interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. Everybody plays, and when you're playing, you get a number of different types of tiles. There's like I know I'm going to use the names wrong, but it'll paint the picture a little better. There's residential tiles, industrial tiles, and like commercial tiles. And just like SimCity, like the residents don't like to be right next to the big smoking factories. So there's maybe negatives if you place industrials next to residentials, or I think they call them urbans. But there's also positives if you put like commercials next to residentials. And there's also government buildings, so that you can or government-run places, so you can put like parks down and stuff like that. So it really kind of feels like you're building this city that's evolving as you play the game. And like all games, it's kind of based on a victory point scale where as you build your city, you kind of increase your point marker on a population track. And so whoever has kind of the biggest population at the end of the game wins. What I really enjoyed the game because SimCity is probably a throwback for most of us at some point in our lives. But one thing about the game is it is one of those games where there's not a lot of player interaction. You kind of are heads down focused on your own city on your turn. And then even when it's not your turn, you're looking at your city thinking, what am I going to do next to my city? So you don't really do anything with the players around you beyond a couple little bonuses like, you can get bonuses for every park in the entire game. So even if your opponents play parks, you'll get maybe some extra dollars for there. So it wasn't as bad as, I'll say this, it wasn't as bad as Alien Frontiers, which people who listen to us know we absolutely loathe that game. But it did have a sense of you couldn't really decide exactly what you wanted to do until it was absolutely your turn. Because the playfield of what cities popped up on the board that were available to play changed as the players bought cities. So you didn't really know what was available until it was your turn. So late in the game when you're trying to make some really tactical point-based decisions, you can kind of get into this. I really want to make sure I'm getting the best points, but I also don't want to have analysis paralysis because that's just being a bad gamer and that kind of thing. So, Matt, if you remember, what was that game we played at your house at one time? It was like the castle building game.
Yeah, you know what? I don't even know the name off the top of my head, but
it was like some guy's name's castle or something.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I remember that game was kind of the same where, as people would buy tiles to build their castle with, new tiles would be revealed. And the tiles kind of they slid down in like their cost or something like that. So this game was very much like that. As somebody would buy a city, new tiles would be revealed and they would slide down this ranking system that made them cost more. But fun game. It's fun to build a city, play kind of SimCity on a board game level. Would I play it again? Maybe once or twice. Is it one that I would go back to a lot? Probably not, because I like games where you actually interact more with the players around you. And this game had a little bit of a less of an interaction skill. But that was one of the new games I played, so I'm hitting my resolution right out the door there.
Nice.
So feeling
Very
good about that. Last one, which I'll keep simple because I think Matt's probably going to have some good stuff to talk about it, is Elden Ring, which a lot of people are probably digging into right now. I've had a lot of work travel since I've been gone on the podcast a lot, and so every moment I have, I'm like trying to play catch up on Elden Ring, just burning hours through it. What's funny, dude, is I think I paid $50 for the game because we had like a $10 off coupon. I think I have like 70 plus hours in that game right now. Like that's less than $1 an hour, right? And I'm sure I'm gonna double that, just because there's so much in that game.
For the amount of time you played it, like you only had it like a week and a half before you traveled.
I know.
And you have 70 hours in it already.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, look, and I'm probably on the low end of everybody on my list, right? But
definitely.
Yeah. Right. But I mean, you think about the return on investment that game provides. It's just, I think, Matt, you said this once when we were playing, it's like the epitome of gaming right now. Or just, maybe the epitome is the wrong word, but it's the culmination of like all things that make gaming great right now. A developer who's really made something for the player base. It's just an amazing game. But anyways, that was my Geek Week.
Yeah, it's very good. Very, very good. Matt, let's kick it to you since nice transition to Elden Ring.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna go off that then, because all I've been doing is geek-wise is just playing Elden Ring. And I mean, I'm not gonna get into it, bore everybody, because everybody who plays Elden Ring already knows about it. They already know all about everything. And anybody, I think at this point, if you're not playing Elden Ring, you're probably not interested. But yeah, I probably, I mean, can I tell people how many hours I've got in it? And it's probably not that many for considering some of the other people out there that I see playing the game. But I mean, I've probably got over 150 hours, so I've probably doubled Jason. And it's just as a Dark Souls fan, this game really was easy for me to play. It's so easy for me to get into. It's so easy for me just to be amazed by what they did. Yeah. And one of the important things, and I think Jason might have been trying to get to this, was that this is a complete game. Most games now are partial games. They're games that feel unfinished. They're games that feel like the developer either chopped content for time or decided to make some DLC or microtransactions. As of right now, there's no microtransactions, and obviously the DLC hasn't come out yet. The game just came out, and there probably will be DLC down the line. But with no microtransactions, that's a big deal for gaming right now. And to have such a huge, successful game without microtransactions and other little ways to ding the player for more money, it just makes me want to support it even more.
It's pretty amazing. I mean, how much content is in the game. Like, look, I have bought a video game in the past for $50 and beat it in 4 hours, and I was like, really? Like 4 hours of gameplay for $50? This is like, I don't know, man. I mean, Matt, how far would you say you are in exploring the content of the game
I
right
mean,
now?
I'm maybe 2/3 of the way through at this
At
point.
150 hours.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I mean, and I'm going slow too. Like to be fair, you know, Jason's going slower than me, not just because he's not around,
Right.
but like I made a concerted effort not to look a lot of things up. And you know, I've been so interested in it, so absorbed in it that inevitably I wanted more information. And so I definitely have looked things up. I'm not doing a blind run. But you know, I haven't done a lot of that, so my game has been slow. I've been moving super slow, just investigating, exploring, trying things out, and I mean, it's such a great game that it just welcomes that kind of thing. Whether you want to run through it, get to the end, and play it again, or just go through really slowly, it's just been such a great experience.
Yeah, I played it, and it got significantly better when they fixed the multiplayer server issue in the very beginning, right? Like it just wasn't working.
Yeah, there
But
was a couple of days.
yeah, yeah, exactly. It wasn't very long. And as soon as it got working again, it was so awesome to like see people's cryptic messages on the edge of a cliff, like no, stop, you know, and you're like, stop what? And then you jump off and you're like, oh, that's what they meant, you know. or you see a blood splatter and you see the ghost of them disappear down a hole and you're like, well, that didn't work out for them, you know. So it was a lot of fun, like seeing that, right, seeing how people like, oh, okay, well, that didn't work. So it's good times.
I think my favorite was looking at a blood splatter and seeing the guy in the middle of the forest, seeing the guy just skyrocket like 100 feet in the air in the middle of the forest. You're like, whoa, what did that?
Yeah, it's great. And you know what? I agree. I think it's on par with The Witcher 3 or Red Dead Redemption in terms of like just massive content, right? Because I played Witcher 3 and that took me a long time to get through, and I was doing like every quest. I didn't care if it was way beneath me. I just wanted to like do everything, right? And so that was really great. Red Dead Redemption and Red Dead Redemption 2, again, those were I think the difference with Red Dead Redemption 2 maybe is like there's bugs in it that were kind of hilarious. You know, like you'd be like driving your wagon, you'd like go over a train track, and all of a sudden like you'd be flipping upside down, like for no apparent reason, and it was just kind of hilarious.
Yeah.
So there was like funny bugs in it. I don't remember seeing too many bugs in Elden Ring. Maybe they were there, but like I didn't encounter anything that stood out to me that was like, this is an unfinished game, you know. Because
So there's something that's interesting there, and that is as they're updating the game, they're kind of trickling out either content that maybe wasn't finished, or maybe just I don't know. I'm not really sure, and I don't think the community is really sure why they're doing that. Whether, like I said, it was unfinished, or maybe they're just trying to elongate the initial play time of the players. You know, people have to go back who've already done something and maybe do it again. As they release these updates, the NPC quests are being extended, and in some cases changed around slightly, adding summoning, just different things like this that it kind of feels like, and in my opinion, I would say that they maybe did it right. Instead of delaying a game longer to do some small things, this is just my estimation or even a guess, but you know, maybe they identified some things that they could have worked on longer and just kind of were able to figure out ways to not release it at first so they could finish working on some of the stuff and then release it weeks later.
right.
Now, again, that's just pure speculation on my part, but either way, the way they did it, it makes more sense to me than to release something that either doesn't work or something that feels chopped, and that it was never make it back into the game because they just abandoned it because they couldn't finish it.
Yeah, it definitely. I mean, it feels more like, you know, the patches and the little things that come they're not fixing problems, they're balancing the games. Like you said, the game was complete. It wasn't a broken game to begin with. I feel like they're watching the player base and they're balancing the game to make sure it plays as intended versus just fixing something that was broken from the beginning.
Yeah.
Well, obviously we all like it. I don't know if this game is for everyone, but I think, like you said earlier, Matt, those people who are playing Elden Ring, they have already pretty much discovered it, right? And those people who aren't, it's probably not for them. But it is a great game. It's a lot of fun. If you haven't checked it out, at least go check out some of the videos on YouTube and things like that, and see if you like it. If you're a Dark Souls fan or the Ghost of the Ghost of Tsushima?
Ooh, that's Sekiro.
Yeah. But anyway, so yeah, if you're a fan of Dark Souls, like, this is absolutely the game for you. So check it out. Let's see, Dan, how was your Geek Week, buddy?
I've had a lot going on outside of geekery, but our Klingon Empire group got together on Friday. It had been a long time, and we're really starting to get a hang of the game, even though one player didn't show up. It's a 5-player game. One player didn't show up, and only one other player found their character sheet, and there were 3 players with no character sheet.
Gosh.
So I have a file of backup characters, and it worked really seamlessly. And in fact, that's like your ship in Star Trek. The Federation Star Trek's the same way. You're supposed to play background characters sometimes. It's okay.
Yeah.
You're supposed to cycle them into the story. And so they had a lot of fun playing the characters that are usually sitting on the ship while they go off an adventure. Those folks got their time in the sun, and it is a really lethal game. I mean,
lethal. I love it.
Any combat that goes over 3 rounds, everybody really starts freaking out that they're going to die. And that's one of the reasons your character died. Just play one of these other crew members. Look, you're replaceable. Bing. And, like in Star Trek 3, the Klingon officer accidentally blows up the science vessel on SETI Alpha. That happened. That literally happened. They were trying to... there was a Gorn ship that was escaping that had a prisoner, and they were trying to get a prisoner off the ship. And they couldn't beam it out. And so they target the engines, and they wail on the engines, and they're like, okay, next round, we don't need to wail on it. We just need to burn off the shields. It's only got a few more points of shields, and then we'll beam our guy out, and everything will be just fine. And, of course, that's not what happened. They had disabled the engines, and then they were just trying to burn off shields. They didn't target a specific area, and then they rolled on the random table, and then they hit the engines. And so... They had a very difficult time beaming that guy off. I figured out a rules loophole that allowed him to get off before the warp core exploded. But there was a lot more interaction that was supposed to happen between them and the Gorn captain. So it really does feel like everything that you do on the ship matters to keep everybody alive. And it can all go south in a moment's notice. I could really feel the tension ratcheting up. So give this game a chance if you want to feel like you're a crew and everybody can't screw up. We had one person who, these are games where somebody has to decide to be the captain. And I knew that she's a person who has strong opinions, and she purposely didn't make herself the captain. And she's just putting her teeth in her tongue going, oh, the captain, but maybe if you min-max this and min-max that, it would all work out. And I would just look over at the captain player and say, what are your orders, captain?
Nice.
And it would be the opposite of what the other player wanted. So good fun. It's great. It's great. It's cool having a non-standard morality in a game. It's like one of the worst things that happened was not murdering innocent Gorn. The worst thing that happened is we had a player try to interrogate, a Klingon tried to interrogate, they were trying to rescue somebody, but they turned him into prisoners because the Klingons were being jerks. They just assumed they were bad, and so they threw him in the brig and were yelling at them. But he failed. A Klingon failed on on an interrogation check, and I had this human just ream him out. And it was like, I'd never seen a player get his tail tucked between his legs. You call yourself a Klingon?
That's so funny.
It's really fun. We're having a great time with it. The other thing
awesome.
is, we've been
Everybody's
doing.
still friends.
Everybody's still,
right.
yeah. You got to have a group where you can kind of be rough and tumble a little bit. My son and I, we took him like 3.5 years ago to a Viking festival, and he got really inspired, and we bought him this really nice wooden sword that was made out of some really nice wood, and he plays with that thing all the time. And the thing is solid wood too. If he hits you with it, you really feel it. So he's been wanting a shield for a long time, so I made him a nice kind of circular 18-inch diameter shield and put like a metal handle on the back of it, and he wanted to paint it as a pokeball, and we did that. It was really, really cool. So now he's got a sword and pokeball shield, and he's just a cool little Viking, that guy. And part of that, I have to get all these woodworking projects behind me is I went and bought some more Forstner bits. Now, if you guys who are not woodworking guys, Forstner bits are great because when you drill into wood, they leave a flat bottom. And so I'm building out a palette for my Citadel paints that just came in the mail. The Citadel paint pots, as I was told by Justin, have a bad reputation of being knocked over. And so
Well, the washes mostly.
the washes.
Yeah, they have the taller ones. Yep.
Well, if you drop any cylinder into 3/4 of an inch deep, wood cylinder, it's going to be a lot harder to knock over.
That is true.
So that's one of the other little things I'm doing. Is I had to build a bookshelf and a pokeball shield in order for me to work on the next woodworking thing I wanted to do in the cube.
Whatever it takes.
Which was geek oriented. There,
Yeah.
Meg, you're getting your bookshelf tonight because there's other things I want to do in the wood.
I mean,
shop.
you're using the contrast paint too, right? That's
Yeah.
what so that's the stuff that'll tip over pretty easy as well.
Yeah, and I got
because it's tall and it's very liquidy, right? So
Yeah, I got 8 of them in the mail a few days ago, so I'm
Be
excited
curious
to break them
to
out.
know your opinion on the Citadel contrast paints versus the Army Painter Speed. What do they
Yeah,
call them? Like the
the speed
paints?
paint. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you listen to our last episode where we talked about that? Not last
Oh.
episode, but
I saw the paint or not to paint. Did you
Part
discuss that
2.
in that one? Yeah, that's when I
at,
was out of
It's all
town.
about
at
the
great
speed
length. There's a whole show on it.
Oh,
You
okay,
edited it.
cool. I edited the bookmarks on the front and back.
that's right.
Sorry, I just zinged you for not listening.
okay.
It's okay.
Do you not listen to your own show?
It's on my
then when you're
to-do
not around?
list. It's on my to-do list. Well, when I'm gone for a week and they record 5 episodes, it
Yeah,
takes a
he's
while to
behind.
get to them.
He's behind.
Well, also
He's
there's Elden Ring to play too. so
Download
I
them
get
for
it.
Right.
yeah,
Download
it's-
them for the plane ride, okay? Okay.
right.
I'm sorry, Jay. I didn't mean to call you out. I'm
It's
sorry.
okay. I normally try to listen to them. I just haven't gotten to that one yet.
Yeah. Anyway, we go very deep into this subject, and I will not belabor our listeners with the second.
Short
half.
answer: which ones do you like better?
I haven't tried. I just got the Citadels in the mail,
Oh, right.
and
Okay.
and my goal is to add additional colors that I don't have in Army Painter.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
Citadel does a nice job of having complementary colors that are unique, different hues and stuff. Because very long conversation short. Mixing is a little bit harder with contrast paint for a bunch of reasons. You can do it; it works fine. It's just not as intuitive as it would be working with a normal acrylic or oil paint. So that's my 2 cents there, and I'm looking forward to getting that thing done and getting some more minis painted.
Awesome. That's music to my ears, my friend.
I know.
More minis painted, right?
I have drunk the Kool-Aid. I've drunk the miniature ink. In fact, I had to touch up the Pokeball shield, and I got out the miniature paints to touch it
Nice.
because I spray painted it with masking and stuff like that. But I had a few places to clean up. I'm like, I'll get out my mini paints. They have more pigment.
Very nice.
It's cool to
Very
know the
nice.
Vikings were fans of collectible card games too.
It's okay, as long as he's happy.
Yep. There you go.
Let's see, for my Geek Week, something big happened. My wife decided on a whim that she didn't like where my hobby space was. And it was mostly because, well, it's actually kind of a good thing. She didn't like how crowded it was starting to get.
Okay,
Oh.
this could
Right?
have this could have taken a really bad turn. I came home
Yeah.
from
I
work
know.
one day and all my minis were gone.
That would have been.
All my clothes are on the front lawn too.
Listen, I don't advocate divorce very often, but had all my minis been gone, it would have been a bad day in court, boys.
I'll mention that to her next time.
Yeah,
I see
right.
her.
No, so she said, like, look, you're getting a little cramped. You're doing a lot more with your podcasting. You need some more space, you know. And it's true. Like, I mean, I was kind of like podcasting where I'm painting and all this stuff, and so we decided to flip some rooms in the basement. And so it was a big effort on Thursday and Friday. Like, we had like a bunch of Lowe's runs and Home Depot and IKEA and all this stuff to try to get some, you know, I had to switch TVs. We had to move couches. We had to, you know, move treadmills and desks and all this stuff. And so long story short, I'm in a much bigger room. I got a new new shelving unit for my minis. So I have 2 of them now instead of just 1. I've got 2 bookcases for my stuff, and I'm going to have my own sort of it's a writing desk that I'm going to podcast off of and then be able to set up for like miniature photos and things like that.
This is pretty amazing. Think about it. It's not too often that our wives walk into our hobby spaces and say, "You know what? You should really kick this up a notch.
I agree.
You should take this
Please,
to the
please
next level."
expand this at my house.
I know.
Right.
I know. Guys, I know. This is why this made Geek Week.
Yeah, and
Like-
we've already firmly established that his wife is way out of his league. So the fact
that's
that she's
true, too.
doing that,
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm wondering what I did right in my previous life. You know? She at one point had advocated for me to get a 6x4 gaming table down here
What?
as well. And I said I
said
would love
yes.
to. I would have loved to. I really don't have the space for it. Like a 6x4.
That'd be hard.
It's just the room that I'm in is kind of narrow. So I told her, I said, baby, I love you and I thank you very much for that, but it's just not going to fit. But I would totally have taken you up had it been any other space, you know? But she wanted me to like have it all set up to like do video recordings and all this stuff too. So yeah, like,
dang.
I know. So I'm sitting in my new space. It's not quite done yet. We're still waiting for a couple bookshelves and the table to come for like the space. But I've been kicking around the idea of doing some of video podcasting as well, you know, and Jason and I have talked a little bit about a streaming service that we've been thinking about. And if we do that, I'll have a nice setup to like kind of put behind me, you know, instead of like a treadmill and a sign that says "Make the magic happen," you know. So,
My goodness.
so yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're looking pretty good. My second Geek Week thing, I did a lot of hobbying over the last week. I finished the Red Harvest terrain that I had been working on for a long time, so it's all ready to go. I'm about halfway done painting the Stormcast out of the Dominion box, and they're looking really cool. So I'm painting them kind of according to like the Roman Legion. So I have painted them with like steel armor and accentuated with reds and then golds. And so they have like red cloaks, they have some red shields. I'm gonna give them red lightning weapons because they're a Thunderstrike host. Right, so they kind of
Thunder.
yeah, they use a lot of lightning stuff. So I'm going to put some freehand lightning.
That was a Thundercats reference. I'm interrupting. With them, so.
I'm going to put a bunch of
Thinking. I know.
exactly. I'm going to put a bunch of like freehand lightning on the shields. I think it's going to look pretty cool. And yeah, but I'm like I'm getting close to being done with them. I got to do the lightning effects and a couple more trim things. And yesterday, while we were watching our church's conference that happens twice a year, my family's like, well, we all want to be in the same room and not necessarily down in your hobby room. So I said, that's fine. I'll come up with you, you know? And so I brought up my Kill Team box that I had since last summer, and I started putting it together, and I've got everything put together except for 4 orcs. I need to put 4 orcs together, but the whole box is built, which is pretty good, seeing as I literally unwrapped it yesterday.
Cool,
So,
man. Cool.
yeah, a
for
lot
you.
of good hobbying stuff. So I am fighting the gray. I am fighting it. So lots of good stuff. But anyway, yeah, like it sounds like we all had a pretty good geek week. It's been a while since we talked about it. So
Yeah.
a lot of things have happened. So, but that takes us into our next segment, which is the geek news.
Oh baby. You'd think I would have already done this. You'd think I would have already vamping. Welcome to Tabletop and Beyond News. Sorry, I have to do that. It makes me
I don't
feel good.
I don't think we will ever make that any different.
Why
I
should we?
love it. Right.
I know exactly.
It's different every time. That's my goal.
Yep.
We would just record it once and play the beat over and over again, but this way it's got character.
It's fresh.
And character means lack of craftsmanship. Okay.
And all the kids love the low res stuff these days.
It's all
Yeah.
low res. Who
Need
cares?
to make it a little more lo-fi.
Right,
Don't
exactly.
try to impress everybody. Not going to happen. Speaking of things that are going to happen, there's Chaosium has announced the launch of 2 new tools for both Call of Cthulhu and RuneQuest, the role-playing game in Glorantha. The Call of Cthulhu wiki and the RuneQuest wiki are live now and contain a wellspring of information on both rules and lore for both tabletop role-playing systems. New players interested in either system will find the wikis one of the best ways to take a look at the base rules and settings for both Call of Cthulhu and RuneQuest.
So I was I got this email from Chaosium, right? And they had sent it, and they basically later on in the email they said that it's pretty much all the rules that you can find in the starter set that's on the wiki.
Yeah.
Jeez.
browsing
You
it
know,
now. Yeah.
which is pretty amazing if you think about it. They've kind of made it open source at this point. And I think it's kind of awesome. And what a great way to reference stuff instead of having to like dig through forums from 2009 or something like that, you know?
Yeah. Well, and merging the lore wiki with the rules wiki is really smart because I don't know how many times I've had to jump in between like Wikipedia for Star Wars, jumping into books that are not digital and going back and forth, trying to figure out, okay, now what in the book here was in the cartoons and what was in the, the books and what's not, and ironing all that stuff out is kind of a pain in the butt. It seems like they want to make things smooth for their folks. So I love it. It's cool.
Yeah, very
Yep.
cool. I would say it's just a clarification point there, right? It's not open source, like it's still all copyright. Chaosism Inc.
Yeah,
but
that's true. Yeah, thank
just
you.
the fact that they made it available for ease of access is great. It shows that this company cares about the accessibility for the community.
Right. And imagine how much fun it would have been to have this wiki live and well while we were playing.
Yeah,
And-
versus trying to load one of those like 200 megabyte PDFs on my
PDFs.
phone and scroll through it. Yep.
And the book
Right.
diving digitally. Yeah. So
Yeah.
thumbs up. Our next item of news is Modifius has announced the release of another Star Trek Adventures Briefs PDF with Starbase Adventures. It's now available on Modifius.net, Modifius.us, and DriveThruRPG. I just downloaded my copy. This free PDF offers 10 starters for RPG adventures based around these waypoints, which often act as gathering places for a wider variety of interstellar travelers and are often magnets for adventure and intrigue. Starfleet officers and other travelers encounter a wide variety of situations, be they hazardous or benign, while stationed at or visiting these types of waypoints. And it's cool. I've downloaded it, and each of the adventure seeds has suggestion on the different kinds of roles that might be spotlighted during the adventure. So, for instance, they're not all for the commanding officer. Some of these are for the medical officer. Some of these are for the chief of security. Some of these are for the engineer. So they're kind of cool, and it costs nothing. On DriveThruRPG, it's pay what you want, and on the Modifius website, it is $0 to download. So if you're playing Star Trek Adventures, there's no reason not to pull them down.
I think it's awesome because some of the best episodes on like Star Trek: The Next Generation were the ones where they were randomly visiting some space station, whether it be in space or some, spaceport that's on a planet or something like that. And, something happens there, right? Like something wild happens, and then they get caught up, either as an away party or something's happening on the ship while the people down on the planet are doing something. And, like there's some really great episodes that take place in this type of setting. So why not have, not just a space, RPG, you've got to have like the space ports and places like that. I think it's great.
Yeah, I mean, the original Trouble with Tribbles episode is completely based on them showing up at a starbase. So, yeah, it's good stuff. It's fun. It's great. Like I said, I jumped in, like I'd mentioned on the podcast many times, to get into Star Trek Adventures, and it is a different system. My over 40 brain sometimes needs to book dive because I haven't memorized the rules like I have other systems. But I like it, and it feels like the show. And that's the thing. Everybody who I've played with walks away going, wow, that felt just like the show or like the movie.
Yeah.
So give it a whirl. And as far as humanitarian giving goes, there's Roll versus Evil. They have a note that says, get your game on to help innocent people suffering from the war in Ukraine. Modifius is helping combat evil human traffickers, kidnapping refugees at the border, providing emergency places to stay for women and children in Poland, funding medical supplies for those hurt in the bombings, and evacuation for disabled and senior citizens. It's easy to take part. Just play a game, whether it's Monopoly or with your Grand, Magic with your mates, D&D with your crew, or any of our games. Throw some doneros down for playing, money for a reroll, or redrawing a card, anything that's fun, then donate it on our Just Giving page. Every dollar we raise is being matched up to $130,000. So we should link to this in our social medias. It's justgiving.com/crowdfunding/rollvsevil. So that's justgiving.com/crowdfunding/rollvsevil, all one word. And you can use money to help people who, and obviously we're all watching the news and it's getting worse over there every day. So I'm sure this is, will go to a good effort, for a good use, and know that your donation will be matched up to $100,000. So that's $130,000. That's pretty cool.
Very, very good. Very, very good. The last bit of news that I wanted to cover was that the Nova Open is live. And I know that I have been on the show and talked about how the Nova Open kind of ticked me off.
You've talked some legit smack.
And it was well warranted, in my opinion. However, the Nova Open is under new management. And I did end up getting my credit from the previous years when it was canceled.
Really?
So, I did. It wasn't all of it, but it was a significant chunk of it.
You're kidding.
No, dead serious. So I ended up getting a massive credit for this year's events, which is amazing, which is going to allow me to take a display level painting class that's 6 hours long.
Oh my gosh.
I know, and I'm so excited about it.
That's crazy.
So
yeah,
Justin, real quick.
Yeah.
I don't know what Nova Open is. There may be some people who don't know what Nova Open is.
Yes. This is great. That's great. Let me talk about it because I think this is something that you would be interested in, Matt. So the Nova Open started out as like a Warhammer backyard barbecue that they were raising some money for charity. And it was like 30 players, and they, all chipped in money, and then like the proceeds basically went to charity. It has grown since then to where I think in 2019 there was 15,000 people that came and played there. Yeah, maybe 20,000. Like, it's not Gen Con level that where you get like the 75 to 100 to 150,000 people unique people that come over the weekend. It's not like that big, but it's still pretty big. It's primarily a wargaming convention. So like you're talking, the biggest tournament there is Warhammer 40K, followed by Age of Sigmar and X-Wing and Armada. Like those are the big tournaments, that you have. But you've got a lot of other stuff there too. So I'll be running actually this year a Warcry tournament, which is a one-day tournament.
Awesome.
I know. So it's kind of crazy. I was looking for Warcry, and I noticed that it disappeared from the tournament, competitive tournament, disappeared from the listing, and it was just the narrative. And so I reached out. It's actually on our podcast with James, our last podcast, James O'Brien. He was talking Warhammer, and he is in charge of pretty much all of the Age of Sigmar and Age of Sigmar related events. So I was talking with him, and I asked him, I said, so, hey, are you not running Warcry, competitively? And he says, the TO just wanted to focus on the narrative and didn't want to have to run a competitive thing. I said, well, if nobody's going to do it, like, I'll run it, And I think, Jason, you pointed out, you said, well, dude, you're not going to be able to play, right? So I had said, well, but the thing is if I don't run it, like, I wouldn't be able to play anyway, right? Like, because it just wouldn't be there. So I decided to jump in and TO it, and so we're going to have it's a up to 32-person tournament. It's going to be on Thursday, so we're really excited. But yeah, Matt, like there's a lot of like wargaming tournaments, but there's a lot of other like things there too. They have like Frostgrave, they've got some board game demos, they've got RPGs that you can do. Again, I wouldn't like put it in the same category as like a Gen Con in terms of RPGs and board games, but they've got offerings.
Gen Con is really in its own league. Yes, this is a tabletop gaming convention that's grown beyond the competitive, miniature war games. They're jumping into other things. But it is a high quality event at a very nice venue. There's a lot of events like this around the country. It reminded me of going to Kubla Khan in San Francisco, where everything for a long time all fit inside one hotel, and that's the same thing with this one, but it takes up the whole hotel, and now they've branched out to a couple other buildings, but
the Age of Sigmar stuff is going to be across the street in the Renaissance Hotel building. Which is literally like a 3-minute walk from door to door, right? Like it's right across that little street. So, but the fact is they've branched out into their own venue now, which is kind of nice.
So, what's interesting here is I'm pulled it up and I realized I was given some misinformation about Nova Open.
Ooh.
Oh.
I was told it was the week prior to the week it actually is.
What?
Oh.
So now I actually can go.
No. Oh, Jason.
Yep. So someone told me that it was the week of the 26th of August.
Oh,
and
who told you that? It was not me. I didn't say that.
Anyways.
He thinks I did. I said it was Labor Day weekend.
Earlier in the podcast you said that. But anyways.
Oh, dear. Oh, no.
No, it's okay, because now I can go. But
okay, well,
now I got to
good.
make sure there's actually tickets left, because I missed the opening salvo there. But, this is great. This is great news. But, I'm excited to see you host your first grand tournament at a convention. And hopefully this will be the beginning of something you like to do in the future. We'll see how it goes.
One of our New Year's resolutions was to host a big event.
Yep.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. We said that, right?
We
to
did.
host an event.
And here you go.
Here we
so
are.
We're letting you satisfy our New Year's resolution.
So
Well, look.
we need to talk out after the show about some logistics, because I've got questions and some ideas. I don't want to belabor our listeners with us doing our kind of inside baseball planning.
Sure,
but
yeah.
I've got some ideas I want to throw your way. And I'm on the Nova Open website right now. I've got stuff in my cart, but before I click anything, I want to talk to you offline.
Yeah, that makes sense. One of the cool things about being connected with James, and for those that may have missed the episode just before this, it's our Talkin' Warhammer episode with James O'Brien that literally just came out right before this episode. we decided that we are going to do a list review of the Age of Sigmar lists before the tournament. So that's going to be really cool to have him sit down. We're going to bring in a couple of ringers that we know, like some of the really good players that are out there, and just kind of go through the lists and talk about how good they are, what they're looking like, stuff like that. And I plan to do a similar thing with the Warcry lists with Dan Herrera, our co-host of the Winning Warcry segment of our podcast as well. So I think it's a great way to bring attention to these great games with our community, and also just let our podcast kind of be kind of a thought leader in the space a little bit. So
Love it. I
it'd be
dig
cool.
it. Well done, sir. Well played.
Yeah.
Well played,
Yeah.
my friend. Well played.
So it's going to be great. Looking forward to it. But we'll give you guys obviously more information as we get a little bit closer. We're not to the point yet where I've got everything ironed out for the tournament, but we're really excited about it.
I
So
just want-
if you are,
I
yeah,
want
go ahead.
everybody to know that if you're in the Northern Virginia or area where you could get to Crystal City, Virginia, to go to Nova Open and you want to play in Justin's Warcry tournament, there are currently 9 out of 32 spots left.
Ooh,
So
It's filling up so fast.
They filled up.
Well, no, I think there's
There's 23.
9 tickets sold.
Oh,
I think there's 20. I think yeah.
I was,
Yeah,
That's
I
okay,
think there's
buddy. You're
20
gonna sell
okay,
them.
It's
it's
okay.
filling
Exactly.
up fast.
I think there's 25 tickets left.
I was trying to tell everybody that it's so great.
It's okay.
Oh, okay.
No, it'll be good. It'll fill up as we get closer. Warcry isn't as like in high demand as like the Age of Sigmar Grand Tournament, right? Just because it hasn't been around for as long. But I won't be surprised to see if we get a good solid 20 people in there. And if we get 20 people, I'll be really happy about that.
Yeah, that'd be great. Okay,
So,
let's get on
yeah.
with the podcast because I got all kinds of things I want to talk to you about.
We've got a great topic here. Like I was saying earlier in the podcast, we had done a video review of the Call of Cthulhu starter set game, and I tagged Chaosium in a tweet saying like, "Hey, we just reviewed your board game or your RPG game, and we loved it. We thought it was amazing." And they hit me back and said, "Well, would you be interested in reviewing RuneScape?" And I said,
RuneQuest.
"Oh my gosh, I cannot believe I said RuneScape."
It's okay.
RuneQuest, would you be interested in reviewing RuneQuest, our RPG game? And I said, absolutely. I know nothing about this game, but they had a starter kit, and they mailed it to me, and they sent me PDFs of it, which was super helpful in being able to read through the material and prep for the game and have the physical stuff in my hand as well. So we want to talk about the RuneQuest, not RuneScape, RuneQuest RPG with you today. And we had the chance to play it, what was it, about 3 Saturdays ago? 3 Saturdays ago. And work through it. And we had a great time with it, but we want to give you our impressions of it. So, Jason, why don't I let you kick us off here?
Okay. Well, so the setting of RuneQuest is, and I think Dan, you said it really good, Glorantha or something like that. But
I've got it right here because I've got the wiki up.
that's right. I've got it up too.
Is Glorantha.
Well said, good sir. I think that it was an interesting setting, right? This is one that has more of a Bronze Age or Iron Age feel to it. It's, I often wonder this in Magic settings. Like, if you have Magic that is so prevalent, is it going to stump technological development? And I think you kind of get a little bit of that feel here because it's so accessible to do so many things that we solve with technology in our world, I'll say, that you can just use Magic to solve it. And if everybody has access to Magic, which I think this world kind of is, then it kind of still has a little bit of that old technology level feel to it. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, like why would you become a master surgeon if you could just cast a spell and
Right.
everything sutures up perfectly?
Right.
Like it doesn't matter, right? Like you don't need to be a bone doctor if you could just like wave your hand over it and tap into your magic reserves and dun 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 dun, like the bone's perfect again. So
Yeah.
that's kind of
Yeah.
interesting.
Help your crops grow by, rather than doing irrigation, just say a prayer to your god and do some sort of ritual thing, or things like that. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, and like D&D, there are an enormous amount of gods, I think, in this system. I think the starter kit probably just introduced us to maybe a handful of what the starting characters had in them, but I think that there's so much magic, but there's not just magic like in D&D where you kind of tap into the arcane. I think all of the magic, at least, and this is the impression I got from playing the starter box, all of the magic is tied to a deity of some sorts. Like you're pulling your magic from runes that are tied to some sort of cosmic power bigger than us on the planet. That's kind of the impression I got from that.
I think the other impression too that is that like D&D, if you look at the list of like Pantheon of Gods, you're like, oh,
It's
they
like
just
3
totally
pages.
3 pages, and they took from Egyptian gods, literally lifted their names, took from Norse gods, literally lifted their
Yep.
names, and they've made up some of their own, and I mean, took reference from Greek gods or Norse gods or whatever, and that's totally fine, right? The gods in this one felt more like, again, this is Bronze Age, right? So you're talking like ancient Egypt, Sumerian style, like Babylon, like ancient Babylon type of gods, right? So you're talking like there's got to be Zool in there somewhere, right? Zool the Destroyer,
There is
There's gotta
only
be-
Zool.
So
Some Stargate pyramids start
There
coming
is
down.
no Dana,
Yeah, exactly.
only Zool.
So I liked where they went with the gods because it definitely felt more like it was original is the wrong word. I mean, it was still kind of derivative of like some of Earth's ancient gods, but it didn't feel so cut and paste into the system. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, where you've just kind of merged pantheons together and said, well, anything can really kind of go because there's an infinite number of planes of existences, and we
Right.
can all, that kind of stuff. It definitely
so-
felt a little more like bounded. Go
Yeah.
ahead, Matt.
That's something that I think is on one hand a little restricted in this Bronze Age feel. Kind of restricts you into this certain time and maybe this certain pantheon where some of the other things like D&D, it's more open and allows you to kind of do what you want. That being said, I mean, it's also interesting to note that as Jason, as you said, that almost every character here is a magic user, right? Because of the runes. So they have spirit magic as well as rune magic. And I mean, you can have a fighter who is heavily reliant on some form of magic. And so
Yeah.
even though the setting to me seemed slightly restrictive, they just opened up the characters to be really to allow you to create whatever you wanted in your character. And so I kind of like that about the setting.
Yeah, I
Yeah, it
think
did-
that's an interesting point for sure, which is there weren't really any classes.
Oh, yeah.
Because of that.
absolutely. Mhm.
Right? You didn't have a cleric, you didn't have a wizard, you didn't have a sorcerer, and because you didn't have those things, you also didn't have a barbarian, you didn't have a fighter, you didn't have, you know what I mean? Like you didn't have these things because everybody could use magic, everybody had access to use healing magic, and everybody was trained in martial arts, in terms of like being able to use swords or lances or like kind of different things. Like you had different backgrounds, and we can talk about that a little bit, but like you didn't have the same class system, which I thought was
Right.
kind of interesting because it didn't bound you into being just one kind of person.
It felt very much like there would be. Now, to be fair, we only played the pre-gens, right?
That's right.
But I think Matt and some other people that play with us took an opportunity to kind of explore the character creation on their own. I feel like this system would really open the door to really just create the character you want without having to feel like you have to start from a specific typecast and try to evolve from that typecast like D&D can at some points. Just my thoughts.
No, very very good. I think in that sense the character creation matched the theme very well. right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
So I think that was one of its strengths that it had, is that this game definitely felt very thematic. Like, it definitely felt Bronze Agey, and we'll kind of get into like the combat. I felt very Bronze Age.
It was very true. Yeah, very true to it. And I'm gonna second that. Is played a lot of D&D. I've played a lot of fantasy systems. This one felt like everything inside it was always going to feel true to the setting, no matter what GM you played with, what story arc you were playing. I felt like it had enough of a kind of, I know it may sound bad, it had enough of kind of like, the bumpers in the bowling alley set up so that anything you did would feel like it stayed true to the world that it was in. So I kind of like that. I like the flexibility of sitting down and playing a system where a GM has a lot of freedom to create. But I also like that if I sit down to play RuneQuest, I know what kind of game I'm going to be playing, even if it's a one-shot with a new party that I haven't played with before.
Yeah, I think it's a game that knows what it is, right? And I
well
think
said,
I think that is kind of one of its strengths.
And it has a really strong internal logic between the lore and how that affects your stats. And that was super refreshing, because we just talked about how, everyone has access to magic and your gods and character creation. Well, it doesn't feel like magic is a bolt-on to every class. Like in some games, it's like, you're a rogue, but if you're a rogue that uses magic, you use this subclass. Or you're a fighter, but if you're a fighter that uses this magic, you're an Eldritch Knight. You know what I'm saying? Magic was not a bolt-on. It's like, hey, this is my background. My background entitles me to these things. This is my belief system. My belief system entitles me to these things. And it felt all very, it felt, because the lore has been around since 1975, they've had like 46 years to battle test the internal logic of the universe, which is cool.
And so this came out, I'm glad you brought up the date, Dan. This came out, I think, 2 years after D&D was first published as well. So this is like one of the OGs of RPGs that are out there. And where I think you see D&D expand into almost a multiverse type of thing, this one did not.
No.
This one stayed like Glorantha, and for good and bad, right? Like I think it's not as adaptable, and so there's some people probably out there that are like, it's not for me, so I'm gonna go play something else. Whereas like with the D&D, they might be able to like say, this book setting's not for me. Let me homebrew something else that I like better, and that you can do that. Yeah. But the good part of it though is, again, like Jason said, when you sit down to play RuneQuest, you know what kind of game you're going to be playing, and I think that's a strength. I do.
Yeah, and I don't think the lore is a huge barrier either. Because I think we were all kind of bought into the story with just a really brief introduction. So I wouldn't let that be a thing that turns you away. On the others, but the downside of that, as you'd mentioned before, it's not like, we always joke about how we love Shadowrun, but we don't like the system, so we'll use other systems in that universe. This would not lend itself to that as easily as maybe we've done it in a couple other ways. Yeah. You wouldn't want to like take the system and like, everybody's trying to use 5e to run sci-fi, right? Like there's a gazillion ways to do that. Mm-hmm. I don't think, because the way the runes and the magic works, it would take a lot more pretzel twists to make that a reality. Not impossible, just a lot more effort.
So let's talk about the mechanics, right? Like we got to play test this, and I thought, we had a 5-hour session or something like that. And part of the reason why it went that long is because we were all kind of learning the system as we were going along.
Noobs.
But let's talk mechanics a little bit. Matt, what did you think about the initiative system that RuneQuest had?
The initiative system in RuneQuest, I mean, like most of the things, I have to admit, when I was doing a little research on the game And when we started playing, it seemed to be like there was a lot more to it than after experiencing it and getting to know it. It just seemed great. So I guess, initially, like I said, I thought it would kind of get in the way. Okay, here's the numbering system, the speed. Like everyone is assigned to speed, different attacks, different weapons. It's all assigned to speed, and you basically chart it, and then go through that chart in order. It's very different from Dungeons and Dragons, where you're getting a roll, just like a random roll, and you could do something faster or slower based on a random roll. This is literally your actions dictating how quickly you're moving. And while it seemed to just be kind of almost a hassle at first, once you got to know the system and once you got to understand, well, I can make a choice based on what I'm going to do in order to execute something along with other people and what we're doing as a group, it seemed not just to be very intuitive and a good system, but also to make sense story-wise. I mean, when you're telling the story of combat, to think that the people in that are having combat together, the players, aren't communicating or aren't in some way, doing their actions based on a group and the other actions of people and the communication among the group, it does help there to, again, push the story of combat forward. And that was a big plus.
Yeah, I like what you said there. So they use what's called a strike rank system, right? There's 12 slots in there, and those 12 slots represent one full melee or one full combat round, right? And so you might have something where you say, I want to use my broadsword, and it says, okay, your strike rank is 7. So you'll go on basically the 7th iteration of that round. And if you want to move, it costs you a strike rank as well. So if you want to say, like, I want to move to the guy and swing my broadsword, you might end up on strike rank 8 or 9 or something like that before you can actually do everything together. Because it takes time to do that, right? Like you don't just get to kind of go super fast and pretend like, moving 40 feet didn't cost you any time at all during combat, right? And so I like what you said there, where you get to tell the story of combat, you get to tell that narrative, and then it's up to you guys to figure out where on the chart, where on the little tracker you would end up. And I think a good example was Jason, when you got caught by what we called Big Mama, which was this giant chaos spider beast thing, had kind of tunneled up from under you, and you fell down into the tunnel that Big Mama came up out of, right? And so, why don't you walk us through, like, kind of what your thought was and how that worked with the initiative system?
That was a good example of playing the metagame, right? Because I thought, oh, well, I fell down into this hole. So one of my spells is I don't remember what it was called, but I can basically create a channel through dirt. I can kind of make
like a
huge
rift, right?
Yeah, like a rift. And so I thought, well, I fell down in this hole. Rather than try to climb out the hole, I'll just make a slanted rift up through the earth, so then I can run up this hill underground and pop out, some meters away from this monster, so that I can better assess the battlefield. And so I said, well, I'm gonna make I looked at the strike points to cast the spell. It was low. I'm gonna do that. I'm going to run a certain distance. Okay, that strike points was low. I still have some points left inside the 12-point track. And then when I pop out, I'm going to want to maybe attack with my sword, so that I can get into the fray. But when I looked at that, I said, well, gosh, if I do all of those things, it's going to put me way at the back end of the strike. I think it put me like at 11.
Yeah.
And I said, man, that monster, I'm sitting right underneath that monster. That monster could do something before I get to come in my strike point. So I was like, all right. So I basically had to limit what I want to do. I said, well, I'm gonna cast the spell and run up the ramp to get out of here. And that kept me at a really low point in the ranking, so that I knew I was guaranteed to get that off before the monster did anything to me. And so it was kind of an exposure, like Matt said. Like, at first when I saw this ranking system, I thought, seems like a lot of math and yada yada. But as we played it, I thought, kind of actually, it's cool because it doesn't feel like you're locked into this template of you get to do two things. You can move and attack, move and attack. It's really do whatever you want. You just have 12 units of time that you got to fit whatever you want to into. So it opened the door for a little bit of creativity.
Right, and there's not this weird elasticity of, it's my turn because I have this high initiative ranking, and watch, I'm gonna chain link 50 actions together and stretch out that simultaneous slot in a weird way, which is something we see in other games. This one felt like what you're doing affects your initiative. What you're doing, and that I've never played an RPG that had that before, and that was cool. It also, for a strange reason, I was a guy who was really decent at fighting. However, I had a magic ability to scare somebody off the battlefield. Well, that was useful, and I was able to use it maybe 2 out of 4 times that I attempted it. But I would do that because magic took a small amount of time. I would attempt that early in the initiative round. And if it went off, I felt like I defeated a whole monster all by myself. That was great. But then for the rest of the round, it's like, oh, well, okay, all right, well, I guess we're going to wait for the clock to come around again, and maybe I'll try this one spell again. Because magic is something that happens very quickly, and versus more hand-to-hand combat, which soaks up different amounts of time on the chart.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, and it's kind of hard to explain without being able to sit down and see it. But, for example, you could, if you're casting a spell that puts you at strike rank 3, right? And you could say, okay, I want to cast a spell, and then I want to draw my sword, and then I want to go over and I want to hit them, right? We start adding that up. It takes 3 strike ranks to cast a spell. Got it. All right. It takes 5 strike ranks to pull out your weapon. Okay. So now I'm in at 8. And then to move up to the thing, it probably cost me 2 more. So that's at a 10. And then the strike rank to swing my sword is a 7. So, I'm at 17. So that's too many to fit in that one round. So I got to pare that down. So maybe what I do is I just cast the magic and then pull out my weapon because I don't really want to move into combat if I can't swing. I'll just be there as sitting duck. But you could also move and just do it so that you're in position the next turn and it's a low strike rank for you. So there's a balance that you play that you have to figure out. And I think the con of this system right here is that we saw this in the beginning, right? When we were playing, which was that you had to figure out what you wanted to do on your turn. And if you weren't sure what that was, it took you a while to be like, oh, I'm a strike rank 8 or 9 or 12 or 3 or whatever it is. It took you a while to figure out, okay, how long does this work? But by the end of it, I felt like we were doing it really well. It wasn't taking very much time to figure it out because you guys could do the mental math before I even asked you, right? I think Omar was like, okay, well, I know I'm going to move. It's going to cost me 2. And I'm going to hit with my sword. Boom. I'm at a 9. Put me down for a 9. And I think if you know it, then it goes really well. If you don't know it, it's going to take you a little while to kind of get used to it.
And it's good.
Because it's very different.
It's different and it's good. And I think it's worth it. It's part of what makes this game different and unique. And if you're going to play RuneQuest, that's a feature. If you would rather be playing a different system, then it's a bug. You know
right. Good point.
In my opinion.
So I like the combat or the initiative system. I thought it was super unique. I've never seen a game that does something like that. The closest thing I think we got, Jason, was maybe Shadow of the Demon Lord, where you had fast turn, slow turn. But even then, that kind of pigeonholed you into, are you just attacking or are you attacking and moving? Right? So
for sure. I think the fast turn, slow turn in Shadow of the Demon Lord is still an amazing initiative mechanic for fast play. in an RPG setting, but you still had a very template of what you
Yep.
can do on your turn. And I don't mean like what you can do, the specific actions, just you had a template of you move and you have an action. And like
Right.
there's two things that you will be doing on your turn. Or if you take a fast turn, one thing you will be doing on your
Yeah.
turn. Whereas
Yeah.
here, it's really, like I said before, it opens the door to be creative. You could do 4 things on your turn if it made sense to be able to do that in the time block allotted.
Right. Exactly. So let's talk about. I mean, the game's called RuneQuest, right? So obviously runes are involved. The runes are interesting because everybody. It talks about in the base materials that basically magic is everywhere. Everybody has this sort of intuitive spirit magic that they can use right from their ancestors that imbue them with magic, and that's where you get a lot of your base spells from. But if you go and adhere to a certain deity and you have an affinity towards a certain deity, then you join one of their cults, and that's when you are taught rune magic and given runes that you know either tattoo or mark on your body. Some people brand them on there. You've got these runes that give you power and ability. So but it's more than just magic. Jason, why don't you talk to us a little bit about the cosmic powers with the runes?
So, there's the elemental affinities and the power affinities. And I think on your character sheet, when you get it right out of the starter box, you're going to see it, one side of your sheet will have it very kind of clearly identified as these are the runes. And the elementals are what you would think, right? Like water, earth, that kind of stuff. I don't think we actually I didn't use those that much when we played. What I did use was the power, which is stuff like, let me see. Let me pull one up here. But it's like life, death. What were some of the other balances? I'm trying to pull a character sheet.
There's man, beast, life, death, fertility, or was it fertility and death?
Fertility, yes,
yeah.
That was a big one, right? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got one right here. Here we go. It's loading up on me. No, I don't have it. Anyways, somebody can pull it up and find it. But I think that here it is. So you got fertility, death, harmony, disorder, truth, illusion, stasis, movement. And what was cool about those is that they are balanced to each other. So both of those values have to add up to 100. So, for example, if your harmony is 30, your disorder is going to be 70. And if you do things as you play your character that lets you adjust one of those, the other one has to adjust in the opposite direction. So if my character starts to become more in harmony, then his disorder number is going to go down, like it just has to.
Yeah.
But you can do these things, so that kind of describes your character, and you can do these things with that called runic inspiration, where if I'm in a situation where, let's say I'm in a situation where I'm trying to, let's take a non-combat situation. I'm trying to help some important, herbal plant make concoct some elixir from some herbs that are near me to be able to cure some disease or something. So I'm just making this up on the spot, right? I could go to the GM and say, look, I want to use my fertility. I want to get a runic inspiration from my fertility side because I'm trying to do this thing that's going to promote or inspire life using, kind of the world around me. And the GM could say, okay, I like that. Then I would have to do a check and just, I don't know if we've gone over the mechanics of the system, but it's very much like Call of Cthulhu or any percentile-based system where you have to roll underneath your score. So if my fertility score is a 45, I would have to try to roll under a 45 on a percentile dice. And if I do, depending on how well I succeeded, I would get a bonus to be able to try to attempt to make that elixir. So I liked this because it left the call for a bonus roll in the hands of the player. Like the GM wasn't sitting there saying,
yes,
let's give you a bonus. It was the player's responsibility to look at their character and say, I think that I should go for a bonus with some runic inspiration in this way. And then the GM ultimately rules it, but it lets the players really take part in the story, I think.
Yeah, our friend Omar, who played with us, was always looking to do this, right? Like, he was like, I really feel inspired by this. And what it really encourages is playing into your character.
Yep.
Like, really playing into your character. I thought it was good. Like, Matt, you used this a few times while we were playing, right?
Yeah, I did. So I was playing like I guess, a fighter who had a very high death and very high, I don't remember what the
Honor,
other one was.
right?
What's that?
Wasn't it honor? Like,
Honor and death. And so, during fighting, of course, it was easy to look at that and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to try to get this inspiration from my death rune and, have better results out of my fighting rolls. And at first, when I was reading about these things, and it's very, very similar, it seems to be kind of a theme for me. When I first saw it, I thought, well, this sounds like it's kind of overpowered. I mean, you're getting asking for bonus on top of bonus, and this is just this sounds like it's kind of too powerful. But again, in practice, it fit well with the systems of the game, where it enhanced the systems to the point where I didn't feel it was overpowered, but I just felt more in control of my character and what his actions were. And that was great. And again, telling the story, whether it's combat or an action, like Jason was describing. So in the end, for me, they were enhancing the story. They're enhancing my ability to play my character. And really, it made the game a lot more interesting and exciting.
And I think it's important to note that you could only do this. And there's another thing too that was called your passions, right? And it kind of like went along with your runes. It was a little bit different. Your passions could be like your tribal affiliation. You had a real strong passion towards it, right? Your family. So like if anything came up with your family, like it was like really important to you. You might have hate for something or someone, and so you could call upon your passions the same way, which is I want to try to get bonuses to my rolls, to make it better. And it's important to note that you could only do one of these kind of calling upon your powers once per scene, right? So if you have a combat encounter, you could only call upon one power per scene, and if you failed it, you failed it, right? Like you just didn't get it. If you failed it badly, then like you lost some of your affiliation to the rune or passion or something like that. But you could only do it once per scene, so it's not like you could do it every other minute and keep stacking bonus on bonus on bonus, right?
Right.
And for the most part, it just added 20% to your roll. So like sometimes like combat, like maybe you were only at like 60%, at a 60 to like hit with your sword. So maybe you're an 80, which that could be very well the difference between a hit and a miss, right? And that's great. But it wasn't like it was an auto hit. In fact, I think it was more balanced than giving advantage in D&D where you get to roll two numbers and take the higher. Right, I think that is a little bit more overpowered than just giving a 20% bonus. Now, if you rolled critically with your runes or your passions, then you could add 30% or even up to 50% on your dice. So like you could be at a 30, to like do a skill check or something like that. But if you rolled really well, you could all of a sudden be in an 80, and that thing's going to help you get it off. So. I like this. I think you're right, Matt. I don't think that this was too overpowered in the game. I was worried about it being overpowered, but I think its limitations helped it a lot.
Well, one of the reasons why it wasn't overpowered, and I think we'll get into this a little bit more as we talk about the combat, but is that it's the game world is a tough world. I mean, it's a Bronze Age world where there are things that are somewhat unique to this game that make the world and combat tough, and I think that again, this just helped not just to play the role of your character, but to be able to succeed.
I think that's a great point, which is the game wants you to do these things.
Yeah.
Right? Like to be able to succeed, like it's like please take advantage of these bonuses because you're gonna need them.
Yeah, you're gonna need them.
You're gonna absolutely need them. So, if you're not doing it, you're almost cheating yourself. Out there. So. But since you talked about combat, let's talk about combat. Jason, you put down here that it's very visceral.
I did. I think that this game, as I think Dan was saying earlier, it has a feeling true to the setting, and the combat really does that. You know, it's a Bronze Age feel. You're fighting hand to hand with rudimentary weapons at times, and when you fight and when you hit, it's, you know, you can chop off limbs, you can chop off, just other. You can hurt other parts of your body. It was very focused on the actual parts of the body, and I think that's what made it feel visceral to me. It's, you know, it's not just in D&D. There's this armor class, and if you hit the armor class, you know, if you meet or exceed the armor class, then in your roll, then it hits, and it's kind of up to the GM, depending on how colorful of a GM you have, to describe how the hit occurs. Whereas in this game, it's if you hit, you roll a dice to see where you hit, and depending on what you hit and how hard you hit it, you could lop off a guy's arm.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean he's dead. It means he takes the hit points associated with that arm off of his character. And if he's still up, he's still up.
Yeah.
And he can kind of keep kind of rolling at you, however he wants, you know, whether it's Black Knight style or whatever.
I was just gonna say,
yeah, but
just a flesh wound.
Yeah. But I really like this because I mean, anytime I hit, I was thinking, am I going to take a limb off? Or anytime I got hit, I was like, am I going to lose a limb? You know, it definitely felt very much more like bloody hand-to-hand combat, or than just, you know, swing your sword and it either takes some points off of his generic hit points or not.
Dan, what did you think about the combat?
I really thought it was cool. I'm going to agree with everything that's been said before. I love a system where weapons break, and it's a Bronze Age thing. We've said it a lot of times, but you know, you may think that you're going to just own in a couple bad rolls and your weapon's busted. It's kind of fun and cool. The other thing about that is you really have to pay attention to the choices that you're making. Your choices matter. Instead of just attack, roll the d20, add your modifier, it's like, okay, now I'm using this weapon that has these properties, and I know that if I have to defend with this weapon in my hand, I know I'm better off than having another option. So it is more crunchy. It's more rules crunchy. So this is a kind of a level up experience, basically, that I want everybody to know. It's like that you're going to be doing more stuff with combat than you would in D&D 5e, but it'll pay off. It'll make it more real.
Yeah, it can slow the game down a little bit because you have to make many rolls for the combat, right? So first off, you roll the hit, against your own weapon score. And so, look, if I have a 75 for my weapon score, then I have to roll under 75, so that hits. And then your opponent gets a dodge or parry, which we can talk about in a minute. So they're going to make a roll there. And depending on the results, you may need to make a roll for what body part it attacked. And also maybe make a roll for like the damage that will happen, and also maybe make a roll for the damage your weapon takes, if any, right? Depending on the parry result. Matt, you had maybe the most awesome experience right at the beginning of the game with your weapon, I think, right?
I mean, I wouldn't say awesome. I mean, it
was awesome for me. It was hilarious to see your face.
Here's what's cool though, because it wasn't awesome when it happened. But it turned into a cool role-playing opportunity. And so we went in initially to a fight, and I immediately, being again the warrior type character, I immediately dove in, and my character had a sword that was blessed by his god, and man, I was pumped. I was ready to just jump in there and start chopping off limbs. Well,
yeah, you're going up a bunch of big trolls right?
Yeah,
with giant
one
balls.
bad roll by me, and one good roll by Justin,
Yeah, it was an amazing roll.
And
It was like a critical success. Yeah.
yeah, and that sword was shattered from the initial like attack. And I wasn't sure. Again, we just started playing, so I wasn't sure how to feel about that. And finished up combat without me for the most part. And I ended up turning it around to an honor thing and having to win back the favor of my god, things like that. But it was a really interesting thing that happened right at the beginning and took me by surprise. But it taught me kind of a hard lesson too, and it got me to know a little bit more about the counter system and understand why it's effective and why it's fun to have in the game. So I actually went from, again, feeling like wasn't sure how, whether I liked this or not. I mean, I kind of didn't because my sword was broken. But
Right.
and then to it winning me over and me feeling like, again, ultimately storytelling in the combat and being able to not just roll for my good hit, but to allow the opponent the opportunity to parry that hit away and just create more of a great story in the combat. So it was, it was a terrible situation, but it ended up actually endearing me to the countering system. So who would have
It
thought?
was your face when I was like, and your sword shatters, was like, wait, what? And I think like Omar next to me was like, wait, what? Like, and everybody's looking around like, his weapon can break? And I was like, oh yeah, it shattered. And everyone's like, I think everyone started looking at their character sheets at like their weapons.
Like,
Being
oh,
like,
Yeah.
do we have
Did
any
that happen to
backups
me?
here? Right? It was pretty hilarious. But you brought up, Matt, the counter system. So why don't we touch on that a little bit? Because it is such an integral part of the combat system and the game overall.
Yeah, I mean, it creates a great story for me when I think about combat and some of the other games out there. It's kind of a one-sided. This is my action, and I'm going to take it, and it's dependent upon a dice roll that I make versus some static numbers. But in this case, each side gets its own role, and again, it helps tell a story as opposed to just my turn coming up, rolling, making an attack. Well, now there's more interaction. There's more interaction between both parties. It's more exciting and interesting. And again, it lends more towards ensuring that you're using your runes, using your other bonuses,
Right.
and your powers that are going to give you an advantage in this situation that is more of a toss-up because there's two rolls now happening instead of just your one roll.
That's a very great point. And you can parry and dodge, right? So you can dodge missile weapons. You can even try to dodge the melee weapons. But we noted just before the show started that the parry system is much more advantageous because usually your roll for your weapons is much higher than your dodge. I think most everybody was around like 30 for a dodge, but you were all probably somewhere between 60 and 80 for your weapon parry.
Yeah, with main weapons.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, main weapon. So, and look, even having a shield to parry helped a lot too, right? So you could have, some people had like a broadsword, some people had knives, some people had a sword and shield, some people had a lance. It just depended on like what weapons they were bringing to the table, but shield definitely helped too, right? Because it had more armor and things like that. So it was really, really good, really good. Let's talk about. I think we touched on kind of the role playing aspect of it, right? Which I felt like the and I feel the same way about most 100 D100 percentile games, which is that I think that it gives you a wide wiggle room for role playing and narrating things. Because it's a percentage, you can fine tune your narration a little bit more than if it's a D20. And I think that just is because you're going in increments of literally 1% if you need to, versus 5% on a D20. So I don't know. What do you guys think about that? like the role playing aspect, you know, as a D100 system. Do you think that this was a good system for that, or what? What do you think, Dan?
You know, a flat probability curve is a flat probability curve. A lot of systems have it, and that's just fine. You know, they giveth and they taketh away, and it doesn't matter if the flat probability, in my opinion, is 1 through 20 or 1 through 100.
That's fair.
It's about the same. Does that mean you should always be pairing weird shaped dice with each other just to kind of tweak with the curve? Not necessarily. I don't think it really hurt the game. You know, there's a lot of games with flat probability curves, so it's okay. Would I prefer it to be different? Sure, but that's my preference, and I don't want to like jam that on anybody. I just think that's my personal bugaboo.
I like the concept of different levels of success that this system could set up.
Oh, that's a good point.
You know, I think in D&D it's kind of like everyone's hoping for that nat 20, right? It's like crit, you know, I got a crit in whatever I was doing, and you know, or a 1, which is I really screwed up. But in this there was like, you know, there's success, there's special success, there's critical success, there's
Agreed.
failure, there's fumble. And I think that, to get to your point, Justin, that opens the door to a little bit more freedom and storytelling as to what actually happened or what the outcome was of an attempt.
I did like that. I like that a lot. Thank you for bringing up that point. Yeah, there's shades of gray in that number on the flat probability curve, which makes it less flat.
Yeah. Yep. And so I think there were, you know, Matt did a great job playing that in a fumble early on that set the stage for how he was going to role play his character earlier on when his
I think he fumbled his roll and I got a critical success, and that's how his sword shattered. I think that's what happened. You know, like it was like the worst roll he could have gotten, and it was the best roll I could have gotten. And sure enough, like, boom, like the sword breaks. And like you kind of expect that in that scenario, right? Like,
yeah, for sure.
Like that is literally the worst thing that could have happened to him in that moment. So
you know what's funny is awesome. from that point forward that night, whenever I parried, I thought about what weapon am I parrying with? Because do I want to lose it? Is it gonna break?
Yeah.
Well, I wish the starting characters would have had more shields. I think that would have been fun, but because I think that was a mechanic that we missed out on because there weren't very many shields in the stack of pre-gens. Now, the stack of pre-gens were great. There were way more pre-gens than we could use in our group. There was probably, we only used half of them at least. And there was a lot of choices. And so as we were passing the different characters around, I think everybody had one they wanted and a good backup. Which felt right.
I think a backup was good because, you know, one of the things about the visceral combat is that everybody doesn't have like huge amounts of HP, right? And I think that I kind of love that. One of the things that does kind of bother me about D&D is it's like as you level up, all of a sudden your hit points like start going through the roof. Like, are you going through growing pains? Like, are you taking like super vitamins or something like that? Like, how are you getting all of this health? Like, you technically like are a 400-year-old dwarf. Like, shouldn't you have like gotten this health like before? You know. So it's funny that like experience will all this in D&D will all of a sudden give you extra health, right? You don't really level up health wise in this unless you've got something that's giving that to you very specifically, like maybe a rune or a charm or something like that. And so everything's kind of low HP. You kind of counter the combat through armor that you wear, and through your parrying and things like that. So I think what's nice is that you know, with the pre-gen characters, as you were saying, there was backups because there was a strong chance that people could have died even in these opening games. You know, like it could have happened easily. If I got a crit hit, you know, like a critical hit, and I hit you in the head, like, and you didn't parry, like, there's a chance I was lopping that thing off.
Yeah.
You know, so definitely a possibility. So I thought it was really good. What would you say were some of the pros of the game?
Ooh. Well, I think in terms of mechanics, we talked a lot about how the initiative system played well once we got into it and thought that it was really cool. I thought that was pro. It has a unique feel. We talked a lot about the visceral aspect right now, which I think was cool, and the parry system, which I thought was a big pro. In terms of from a GM perspective, pros on running the game, you're probably more appropriate to answer that since you were our GM for the night.
Yeah. So this is gonna be a pro and a con. I'm just gonna let people know that up front. But one of the pros was that it came with a lot of tables, right? So you didn't have to memorize all of the different combinations of what could happen, especially in combat with the parrying and the striking. So like there was a special thing that would happen if you got a critical strike and you got a normal parry, or something happened if you fumbled your strike and you got a critical parry, right? Like there was actions that specifically happened, and usually like it damaged a weapon or it damaged damaged a person, or there's a certain amount of HP that was taken off. Like it was there was a table that let you know exactly. So it was a quick ref and it was easy to do. One of my favorite tables on here, and this is actually a mechanic that I absolutely loved about the system. It's called the resistance table. And so it's meant for whenever you're trying to do something that has some sort of a stat. So for example, if I wanted to move a boulder out of the path, right, out of the way, well, that boulder has a certain amount of strength based on its weight, right? And so it might have a strength of like 18. Well, my strength might be 9. And so you look at this table and you looked at the active. I'm the active person trying to move it. I take it, look at 9. And then I go down to the 18th level of the passive one because the rock is the one that's being moved, right? And I look at that number, and that's the number that I need to roll under. Now, if I'm a 9 and that's an 18, I probably have to roll under like a 25 to do that. Where this really shined more than anything was in some of the magic, right? So we had our friend Nick was really loved using magic, and he would try to was using magic against these scorpion kind of centaur looking guys. Centaur's the wrong word. They're scorpion men, half scorpions. And he was using magic against them, and he had a pretty high magic, and they had a pretty low magic, so he was rolling like under 85. And that was the same with you, Dan. I think that you had, you're like trying to scare them away, right? And you would roll under it and be like, "Hey, this is easy." Well, then Big Mama showed up. Right?
Yeah.
And Dan's like, okay, well, this is easy. I just had to roll under like an 80 last time, and that was no big deal. Well, her resistance to magic was like way, way higher.
Yeah, not so
So I'm
much.
like, Dan, you have to roll under a 20 for this one. And he's like, oh, yeah, that didn't work.
Whoops.
And so narratively, I thought it was really amazing because here you are, like, you expect the big chaos monster to have like resistance to magic, and so it's going to be a lot harder for you to use your magic against that with success than some random minion type of guy, that's there. And so again, that worked with everything. It worked with magic. It worked with strength tests. It worked with drinking contests if you wanted. It worked with like a lot of different things. And you would just do this table, and it would give you the number that you needed to roll under based on your statistics. So I thought it was maybe one of the best tables that I've ever had in a RPG in terms of being able to figure that kind of stuff out. Because, like, how does grappling work in most systems, Jason?
Horribly.
Horribly. But guess how grappling works in this one, right? Like, you compare strengths and you roll it, and it's really easy to figure out. So yeah, I mean it was a really cool table. Some of the other tables were really great. I really liked them. And because of that, I felt like, this isn't your mother's D&D game type of thing, right? Like you had a lot of different things that could go on, and that made it feel more vibrant, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Vibrant. Visceral is the right word I think you used, Jason. It allowed you to do, I feel like, a little bit more, and be a little bit more narrative about it, and let the dice kind of do the talking a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what we've talked about how this game, is very visceral. It's very lethal at the same time. People don't feel like they have a million hit points. That everyone has the same kind of ability to die as the next guy, which keeps it true to the setting and the feel of the time period. So what are some of the cons that you had as a GM in preparing the system?
So let's go to the tables. There were so many tables. There were so many tables to look at, right? And it was almost like, and I think that if I had the RuneQuest GM screen up in front of me, like that's where a GM screen really would have helped. And normally I don't like playing with GM screens. I don't like kind of being walled off, and I don't care if players see my numbers. You know what I mean? I tend not to fudge them. In fact, I don't really fudge dice. If I need to fudge anything, I'll maybe pull a punch on an ability or something like that. Maybe not go for like the most lethal strike that they have in their arsenal.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But I usually don't fudge dice rolls, and I like my players seeing them. With that said, I think that their GM screen for RuneQuest would have been great because all the tables would have been in there, or like right there. That I could have, I didn't have to shuffle through papers or look on page 10 versus page 24 versus page 5, and have to like kind of flip through those types of things. So the amount of tables, you're starting to do a lot of bookkeeping, and that was a difficult thing. And I think that the burden of bookkeeping falls on the GM more than it falls on the players.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And so, like, for example, I had at one point 6 of the Scorpion men, and I had to keep track of each one, not only their overall hit points, but which leg had been chopped off and or damaged, right? As well as like what their armor stats were, what their weapon stats were in terms of their health, and this is for 6 different things. Like I had to keep track of those 6 different things. So it was a lot of bookkeeping that you had to just kind of be on top of as a GM. So I feel like to really run this well, like as a GM, you need to know the system well, which is hard if you've never played it before. But you got to kind of learn it and then like go through it, So it's easy. I think we felt in the beginning, especially, and you guys can chime in on this one. Did you feel like we were getting bogged down in like number crunching in the beginning?
I think so. What do you think, Matt?
I didn't think so because, I just took it as learning the game in the beginning. So I didn't necessarily feel like it was any worse than any of the other games. I have an interesting perspective. You guys are much more versed in a lot of these RPGs than I am. I am old school first and second edition D&D, and I played a tiny bit of third, but I haven't played all these different role-playing games that you guys are more familiar with. And I just got exposed to some of them like last summer. And, so for me, there's a lot of learning. So I don't know necessarily if we were getting bogged down because to me, I was just learning a new system. But I didn't feel like, there's definitely more to it than say some of the other percentile games that I played over the summer. With Cthulhu's one and Mothership. So for me, it didn't really seem that way. I didn't seem bogged down. But I also don't think that I felt like it was much more accessible. And maybe that's why I don't necessarily feel like I was being bogged down, because to me, these percentile games, like the other ones I mentioned, and that includes RuneQuest, is they just seem like a little more accessible to a person like myself who has a little bit of a background, but I'm learning a new system. They seem intuitive, and while it takes a little time to learn, once you have it down, it's intuitive and simple enough to where you feel like you can enjoy the game, and at least what you're doing enough to enjoy the game, to create a character and have a lot of fun.
That's good perspective for sure.
I think it's a great perspective.
Yeah.
I think if you're coming from D&D, it might feel a little bit slower, but I think your perspective is awesome. Like once you if you're chalking it up to learning the game in the beginning, then it's gonna feel like a little bit slower. But once you get it, like we were humming there at the end.
I think
we were
so.
doing pretty
Yeah.
good at the end.
Let me. This is a chart. This is not a flaw to the game itself. This is a flaw to the box set. I thought the box set is great. I mentioned it on our other podcast. It's got a lot of page count in that box. It looks the same thickness as all the other boxes where you're mostly buying air. This one is, you can pick it up and feel it. It's heavy.
Yeah, definitely.
However, everyone has magic, and they didn't print the spells on the character sheet,
Yeah.
and they had room to do it, and they didn't do it. They put some great flavor text on there, and that's really important. They have beautiful artwork photos that are taking up one whole page.
Yeah, full page.
Those could have been halved, and you could have given me like the quick, dirty version of my spells. The book diving that we had to do was passing the one book that we had around.
That's right.
And going, oh, what does my spell do? What does my spell do? What does my spell do? And that was less effective.
It definitely slowed it down, having to look up everything. But again, we're learning the system. But yes, regardless, being a starter box set definitely would have been nice to have a little more character pertinent information on each character sheet.
Yes.
And we talked about, like, there was lots of pre-gens in there, which is awesome. I totally agree with you. Writing the spells on there would have made the pre-gens perfect, in my opinion. Like, because they were really, the way they designed it with like the two flaps that came out that had extra stuff on it, so it was kind of an 11 by 17. I like those character sheets. They just were missing that one. They were missing that one thing that was critical. Yeah, that was critical. So it had a bunch of other stuff in there. It had like maps of the world. It had maps of the town that we were in, right, that you could pull out. It had the rules booklet, which was excellent. It had the adventures booklet that had 3 very fleshed out sessions in them that you could roll with that were very good. But I'll tell you my favorite thing about this box set, and it was the same thing with Cthulhu. They had a solo adventure that would teach the DM how to play the game. And it was like a choose your own adventure style, right? Like you do this thing. If it succeeds, go to number 98. If it fails, go to number 134, like that type of thing. And I just had so much fun playing it. Like so much fun playing it.
That's great.
And it was the same thing with Call of Cthulhu. Like I was really worried. I had read all the rules. I was really worried about running it with you guys. And then I played the solo adventure and I said, I got this. And I understand what this game is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it really immersed me. And I said, I know what this game is. I know what it's trying to be. And it was such a fun adventure. I said, it's fantastic. And I came in with a lot of enthusiasm because I had played that solo quest, So I can't speak highly enough about Chaosium including the solo quests in their starter kits. Like they're just so good for the new DM. It's probably a new system for the DM too, even if they're a veteran DM. Just to get to know the system and the flavor of the setting too.
Yeah.
It was really good, really really good. So overall, guys, what would you if you were to buy this starter set out of 5? What score would you give it? Let's start with you, Matt.
Well, so I'm going to be honest with everything here, and that starts with me not loving the setting. I feel like the fantasy settings, even the real world settings of Cthulhu, the sci-fi set, for whatever reason it is, I'm just not into the Bronze Age setting. I love the game though. I thought it was really great. Like I said, especially after getting into it, the contents of the starter set was great with the small things that we noted. I would say that the set in general I'd give it a 4 out of 5. It's a strong 4 out of
Oh,
5.
that's a good 4. That's a good score. That's a good score. What about you, Dan?
Clearly, I there's no way I could give it a 3. So it's got to be a 4 for me because I think I had a 4 level fun. And I'm thinking, well, what was my fun level? And we had a great time. So the game did not get in the way of a good RPG session. It facilitated an interesting RPG session. And I'm going to echo one thing that Matt said earlier, which is that the mechanics help tell the story, and that usually doesn't happen in combat. And that was great.
Right.
What was happening in combat had story. Just by rolling the regular combat rules had story implication. And that was fun. And I liked it. And it made the combat fighty, rock'em sock'em, as well as interesting and different. So 4 out of 5 for me.
Nice. Jason, what about you?
So this is an interesting one because I had some feedback from someone who watched one of our videos when we did Call of Cthulhu starter box on YouTube. And we got to the replayability score, which I think for board games was an easy score. For RPGs at the time, I think I said, it's an RPG. It's like always going to be replayable. There's like an infinite amount of stories and stuff you can do. So I gave it a 5. And the feedback I got from a reviewer was, maybe when you do RPGs, that score should not be replayability in terms of from a player base. Maybe it should be like how easy is it going to be to continue to play it from like a GM point of view.
That's a good point.
For RPGs, since that's kind of like the thing, like how easy is it to continue to make new material quickly, to be able to sit down without having to invest in. And I know we talked a lot about, I'm going a little bit long here, but I know we talked a little bit about over the years, really the years that we've been doing podcasting, techniques for being good GMs, for being able to prepare things quickly. And I think that any person who knows the system, knows the setting well, can go in without a lot of prep into a system. I think that if you have those tables with you, and once you get familiar with them so that you can pull them quickly, just like when we play systems, like with Mothership, I know exactly where to flip in my guide to look up a rule.
Right.
We just get familiar with it. Once you get familiar with your tables, it'll probably come a lot faster. So I think that I would give that score, which is replayability, I think I would give it somewhere around a 3.5 to 4, just because I think there's a lot of bookkeeping associated with this system. But in terms of overall fun factor, I would play this if I was in the mood for a straight up sword and board. This is what I would want to play over D&D. I would want, if I wanted to go in with a shield bashing and sword smashing or whatever, this would be it, because I would feel like Dan said, that the actual mechanics of combat would tell part of the story, much more so than D&D does for me when I play that. So I would give this a 4 out of 5.
So I'm going to approach this from the GM, perspective, because that's how I did it. This was stressful for me to run. And I think a big part of it was because it's the first time I ran it, right? Like, had it been the 10th time for me to run it, like, I would not have felt nearly, like, stressed. But having to be able to be like, oh, I'm not sure what your spell does. Here's the book. You know what I mean? And being like, okay, wait, where's that table? Hold on, I gotta find it. Give me a second, guys. Sorry, hold on. I felt like I was doing that a lot. And that was, again, like, me, like, being pretty familiar with, like, the materials, but not, like, experienced with the materials to where I was like, okay, I know exactly what you're trying to do. Now, near the end, I felt like I was like, okay, hold on. Boop, yep, got it. All right, here's your number. Okay, and once we figured out the strike rank stuff, that was going much easier. So I actually, as the night went on, my stress level went way down. Because I felt like we as a group were getting it, like we were understanding it. So, and I was having more fun with it because I was understanding the game a lot more. I think we all were, right? But especially me as a GM, like I was understanding it more, so it was easier for me to make calls or rulings, or and be like, yep, absolutely, do that, go for it. Okay, yeah, cool. Because I understood the game a lot more. So with that said, the starter set, if I'm to judge it just based on the starter set, I'm giving it an absolute 4 out of 5. I'm close to a 5 out of 5. In fact, you know what? I'm going 5 out of 5 for a starter set.
Wow.
5 out of 5 for a starter set, and a lot of it is that solo campaign. I know you guys didn't play it.
I wanted to give it
but
a
I
5,
did.
but the stupid
Yeah.
spell thing. They lost a whole
Yeah,
point
I
on
hear
that
you.
for me. You know what that
That's fair
requires the
enough.
GM to do? To go through, find every spell for every character and photocopy it and
Yeah.
add an extra page. There you
So
go.
what I was actually planning to do, and I just unfortunately didn't get to it, was I was going to print and photocopy all the spell section and just have a copy for each of you to be able to look up your spells. And I just didn't get around to doing that.
And that that goes back to the design of the box set for me.
Yeah.
For me
yeah.
anyway.
Yep.
I would have
But-
loved to give it a 5.
yeah.
I probably would have given it a 5 if it wasn't for that.
I'll say this though, I have used several starter sets, including the D&D ones. I've used the Cthulhu one. I've used I've had a starter set per se of the Shadow of the Demon Lord, and this one I felt just prepped me more than any one of them to be a good GM for the game. And so from a GM's perspective, I would have given this 5 out of 5. And I can understand your player perspective, right, not having the spells. And that's kind of frustrating for the GM too, but it's more your problem than the GM's, if you understand, what I mean.
Yeah.
Well, that
Sounds like your problem.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I guess I got a problem.
So yeah, I'm giving it a 5. But look, I think we're definitely settled around like a solid 4 out of 5 for this. And I mean, if you're looking for a new RPG, I check it out, right? The starter set's I think it retails for $49. I think it's worth it though. I think it's worth it. You've got 3 or 4 solid sessions in the group thing. So if you're talking $10 a session, something like that, it's worth it. Absolutely worth it. So I can't recommend it enough.
Very cool.
So I think that's about all the time we had. Jason's already told me about half an hour ago that we're about to go over. So
On multiple social media places
Guys,
too. I'm
guys.
pinging you what's he paying attention to? No, it's fine. We're having a good time.
So yeah, check out RuneQuest from Chaosium. They've got a lot of good stuff, and they've got the wiki now. Go check out the wiki.
Yeah.
Get into the lore there and see what it's like. See if this is for you. I mean, it's a free resource that you can access. So, thanks for listening to us guys tonight. Leave us some comments. Have you played RuneQuest before? If you have, let us know what your experience has been. Are you interested in trying it? What kind of questions would you have if you are looking at the starter set? Hopefully, we'd be able to answer some of those. So, answer us on Twitter, Facebook. We've got a Discord channel that's pinned on Twitter and Facebook. So join us in there if you want to talk about RuneQuest. Lots of good things to discuss. So with that, we'll leave it there. Have a great night, and thanks everybody for listening.
See ya.
Thank you so much, and thanks to Chaosium.
Thanks, guys.